This video is part of a playlist where we build this, a Spotify web controller. We can play, pause a Spotify player, we can go to the next and previous track, and all of this built as a React.js Chrome extension. If you have no idea what this is, look in the description for details. Learn how to create Google Chrome extensions. That'll take you from A to Z. What is JavaScript? What is HTML? What is CSS? How do they all work together to power web development? Then, how do we use those same tools to power Chrome extension development? Okay, so I have a basic Chrome extension built with React.js up and running. If you don't know what that is, I'll leave a link in the description below to a video I did on how this whole thing functions. Before we even get to programming, we just need to set up or upgrade the developer environment. And so we have 4 things to do. We're just going to create a better file structure. We're going to install a font, and then we're going to update the manifest JSON. And then finally, we're going to update the Webpack config. I don't think in that order. I think we'll start with the file structure, and then we'll do the manifest JSON. We'll install the font, and then we'll go to the Webpack. So we're just going to add some folders. So in our source, let's just add an images folder just to keep everything organized. So images, and within that we'll have let's say a dex. Let me do this. So this is the folder we're working in, put on the right side. Let's go to the left side, put that on the left, source, images. So let's put the icons in the images folder first. So control cut, put that here. And all of this deck information from the first phase, the asset development, we'll put in the dex folder, except the loading screen. That'll just go in the general folder. So cut, paste, and finally you cut, and you can go there. All right. And we'll create a fonts folder when we install that font. Let's say fonts. All right. Let's update the manifest JSON to reflect the changes. So the name, description, manifest version, the icons are now in an images folder. So images slash, and images slash. For the background script, we're going to be adding something later on. So I'll code for it now. Let's do this. So it's called hasher and decoder.js. Let me put that in the file directory now. Let's go to desktop. It's right here. Hasher and decoder. Let's go into the source. Throw that in there. Hasher and decoder. Perfect. Browser actions. Okay. Permissions. What are we going to need? We're going to need http://*/*. We'll need S as well. We're going to need the tabs. We'll need, let me scroll down a bit. We'll need the identity, so identity. And we'll need storage as well. And we'll need, what is it, https:// I think it's api.spotify.com/*. And finally, we just need to add some web accessible resources. And this is just to make sure that, I think it's an array. Let's do this, just to make sure that when we convert this guy into a Chrome extension, that we can link from our foreground script to image files. So we're just going to do a star.gif, and we want, I don't know if we have any PNGs, but just in case, .pngs. Let me just take a double look at this. 1, 0, perfect. 2, icons, background, hasher, decoder. Options, pop-up, permissions, web accessible resources. Good. Install that font. So let me go back here. I'm using Old School Adventure. I'll have a link in the description on where to get this. So we're just going to take the WOFF file, which should be right here. There we go. And we will, why does this still have that? All right, we don't need this folder anymore. Let me delete this folder. Source, fonts. Let's drag that WOFF. There we go. Is it there? Perfect. All right, so let's tell Webpack how to deal with this file extension, WOFF. Currently doesn't know how to deal with that, and it doesn't know how to deal with CSS files. And so we need to install 3 more packages. We're going to npm install --save dev. We need the CSS loader and the style loader. This tells Webpack how to deal with CSS. And then we need the file loader, which tells Webpack how to deal with how to deal with the WOFF file, this font file right here. So let me just hit enter right now. All right, so we have those packages installed. Let's go to the Webpack config and update it. Let me just do this. All right, where would we do this? So we need to add 2 rules here. So we'll just copy this right here. And go paste and paste. Do a comma here and a comma here. And we're just looking for CSS, extensions with CSS, or files with the extension CSS. We're going to use the, the style loader and the, style loader and the CSS loader. So style loader, and we'll do CSS loader. And for the file extensions, WOFF, we'll just use that file loader. So that takes care of that. Let's update this right here. Currently we're copying PNGs. Let's copy all of the images. So I'm just going to modify it like this. Just copy the entire folder. Source images, and 2, we don't need the name extension thing. We just want to go /images. And let's add an option for that file I added, what is it called? Hasher and encoder.js. And for that we can keep the name extension thing. So name.extension. Okay, so let me just take a double look at this stuff. So we have all this. We're telling Webpack how to deal with the CSS, the font file, style loader, CSS loader. And then we're copying over these images, all of them, including the file structure and our little hasher encoder, which we'll use when we do the back end. So all of that looks good. Let's start building the UI for this guy. Oh, just one last thing before we actually get to the UI part and setting up our development environment. In the video I did where I explained how to create a Chrome extension using React.js, there was a line in the inject script that led to the whole app breaking. So this line right here doesn't need to be here. It actually, I wouldn't say doubly, but it injects the script twice, and this leads to complications down the line. So we don't need that line right there. So we can comment that out or delete it. I'll delete it. I'll save, and now we're good to go. All right, so let's quickly take a look at the CSS for the foreground app. So that's going to be, we need the foreground styles. We need the player right here. And the player has the ticker, the player body, and the player buttons. And the foreground app also includes the loading page. There we go. All right, I'll have all these in a Medium article written up. I'm going to go line by line. Like I said, there's a lot of CSS for this app. So this is the main container right here. This is just the modal we're going to inject into the user's page when we do it. But this is the thing that anchors the app to the bottom right of the page. It's pretty basic. Margin padding fixed, so no matter where the user scrolls, the little cassette player stays on the bottom right. These guys are going to be used for animations later on in the series. We won't get into that right now. So that's it for the foreground. Now the player component, which is a page, it doesn't get its subcontainer from the player. We have right here shared styles. If you want to make more than one page for this app to display in the bottom, they're going to need the subcontainer. So put in a separate file called shared styles so you can share it across different pages of your app. And so this is also fixed to the bottom right. That's just because when we insert images on the bottom right container of the main container here, if we don't fix it to the bottom right, the whole thing becomes misaligned. Again, the player has a bunch of transitions, animations. We won't get into that right now, so close that. Close foreground, the ticker. This is for the ticker. The ticker is made up of a background and then the text overlaying or or displaying on top of the ticker. The player body, a simple container, and some styling for the actual image, the GIF. Position absolute. And so this is just so the image overlaps the buttons. Those buttons are going to be little divs on the screen. If we didn't have a position absolute, the buttons might overlap the image and you just see it just look weird. So that's it for the player body, player buttons, these guys. It's a container for the buttons. These are universal to all the buttons. And then we have stylings for each button. I came up with these widths and these heights just based on testing them. So there's no real mathematical formula for these, just based on what looked good. So with the open and close, we have the play pause. We have the next and we have the previous. You can change the colors if you want. And finally, the loading page. Just a simple container. We use the Old School Adventures font that we installed. We have a loading screen, which is the container for the GIF. And then we have the text here, which says loading. So those are the stylings for our foreground app. Let's actually build this foreground app. So let's do this. Let's get the foreground going and we'll do a split screen. And let me get my browser going. Actually, let's start the app first. So just open up the console and just do an npm run build. Let me get the browser going. Localhost 8080/foreground.html. HTML. Let's see if that's working. All right, good. So the foreground component's not going to be a function. It's going to be a class because we want to do some state work. So let me delete all this. Let's do an RCC. And I don't like this part here. Okay, we need a constructor, so our const. We'll fill out all of this later. Let's start rendering. Actually, we need to import the styles first. So let's do import styles/foreground_styles.css. We also need the player, which we'll make in a second from, this will be ./player.js. Copy paste, and this will be the loading page. We'll make write the logic for whether or not the player or the loading page loads later on in this series. For now, we're just going to keep it at the player so we can see what we're doing. We create those two files there. So player.js, that's going to be a functional component. Save, and we're going to do a loading page.js as well. Functional component as well. I don't like that export default there, so we'll cut that out. All right, so let's go back to the foreground right here. And we're going to add some color so you guys can see how this thing's transforming. But for now, we're just going to do the modal first. That's the entire thing that overlays the user's page they're viewing. So let me do this styles equal to background color, camel case color. We'll do red. There we go. Within this, the actual container. Let me do this. There we go. Within this, the actual container that sits in the bottom right. So it's going to be the Chrome extension container. And within that, we're going to have the player. So player. And let me just do this for the style. So we're going to, let me do it and let me explain it after. So we'll do a width of, let's say, 30%. 30%. We'll do a height of, let's say 20%. And we'll do a background color of black. And so later on, we're going to make this thing responsive. Right now it's hard-coded for 30, 20, and black. And so no matter where we resize the browser, it's going to be 30%. We're going to do that in the code. So when we refresh, when we resize the browser dynamically, this thing is going to scale dynamically. But just so you can see it for now, we're going to hard-code it to 30% and 20%. So that's the foreground page. We're going to add a lot of stuff later on in the video, things like animations and state. But for now, that's just the basic UI. That's the modal. It's going to be clear, obviously, so the user can see what they're on, what page they're on. And this is where the cassette's going to be, or the cassette player is going to be. Let's move on to the actual player now. So let me open up the player. Actually, let me make all the files. So the player consists of a ticker.js, consists of a player body.js, and it consists of the player buttons.js. Let me close this. We don't need the foreground right now. We're going to do the player, and then we'll do ticker, player body, player buttons. So the player is a function, and it's a memoized function. If you know what memoize or memo means in React, it's so that you don't unnecessarily re-render components just because the parent component rendered or re-rendered. So if anything happens with the state on the foreground, if nothing changes within the state of the player, we don't redraw the cassette player, the deck. This saves on unnecessary re-renders, but also if you're animating stuff and your component gets re-rendered, you're going to see skips in the animation. So that's why you have the React memo. And so we need to start by importing our styles and components, just like the foreground. So this is /styles/ this would be player. Just going to do this one first, shared styles. So we have the subcontainer, shared styles.css, copy, paste. This guy's going to be the foreground styles, not the foreground, excuse me, the player styles. And then we'll do the components. So player import ticker first from ./ticker.js. You don't need the JS, but I like to include it. So ticker, then the player body. And then we have, what is it, player body.js, and then the player buttons.js. And it's going to be player buttons. Just do this. So we need a subcontainer because this is a page of the main container. So div, we'll do .chrome extension sub_container. And within that, we're just going to have the ticker. We'll have the player body, and then we'll have the player buttons. There we go. All right. So let's move on to the ticker now. So the ticker is going to be I think it was a functional component. Get rid of this. Control cut. Control paste. It's going to be ticker. There we go. And div. Let's import the styles first. Import. It's going to be ./styles/ticker styles.css. And let's do this. Return div. This is going to be an ID, and the ID is going to be Chrome extension, and it was container ticker. There we go. And within the ticker, we have the background for the ticker and the text. And those are classes, or are those IDs? Let's go styles, ticker styles. Those are classes, those are IDs. Close, ID, Chrome extension, ticker, background. There we go. And within that, we'll have the div with the ID of Chrome extension, ticker, text. We'll just do artist with song for now. Save that. And I did all of that in the wrong file. Let me do this. It should be... Okay, looks good. So let's move on to the player body. It's also I memoized the ticker. I should have memoized it. This as well, because the ticker is going to run an animation. We don't want that interrupted by unnecessary re-renders. There we go. So the player body. It's a React functional component. Get rid of these guys. Cut, paste, player body. Import React. And I think I just imported the wrong style sheet for the buttons. /style/player body _styles .css. There we go. And we just need two elements here. So div, and it's going to be a Chrome extension container underscore. This is the player body. And we need an image. And the ID for the image is going to be what? Let's go down here. This is the player body. Player underscore GIF. So Chrome extension player underscore GIF. There we go. And the source, let's do this. We have a constant here called the images path. It's going to be equal to /images/ there we go. And alt, we'll just do image for source. So images path, and it's going to be /dex/ let's do a pause. So pause, the type of deck, we'll do the orange. We'll do the cassette. Let me close this. Cassette will be, let's do punk dark, and that's a GIF. All right, images path, div, source, alt, ID, player body. Good. Let's do player buttons. So we're going to have our little container for it, div, let me move the mouse. It's going to be Chrome extension container _ player buttons. And we're going to have four buttons here. So they're all going to have a class, the same class of Chrome extension, player, this guy right here. And they're all going to have different IDs, but their IDs start with Chrome extension -button. No, not button X, just button. Times 4. Can we get that? Good. And this is going to be, let's do the open _ close. The next guy is going to be, play _ pause. And then we have the next, and then we have the previous. All right, so there we go. That's what it looks like so far. We're going to adjust all of these elements, the sizes, dynamically. So right now it just looks misaligned. We're going to go into the code, and when these components load up, they're going to read the width and the height of the canvas, and they're going to adjust their position accordingly. So let's move on to the last part of the foreground app, which is that loading page. So let's do this, and so we can see if we're doing it properly. In the foreground, instead of the player, let me comment this out. We're just going to do the loading page. Let's get this guy up. It's going to be a React function component. Good. Let's do import the style. So it's its own page. So we need the shared styles. So /style/ shared styles.css, and then we'll need the actual style for the loading page. /style/ loading page _ styles.css. And I think there's three things here. There's a container, so that Chrome, actually it's a subcontainer. So we need the Chrome -extension sub _ container and its own properties. I think it has its own properties. Let me do this. Loading page. Chrome extension loadings. Nope, just has the, yeah, it does have its own container. All right, I keep that open. And then we have the Chrome extension, and it's loading, or container loading page, container loading page. There we go. And has the screen. So Chrome extension loading screen. And we have the loading text. So the text should be here. And that first div should be an image. So div, let's do Chrome extension loading text. And we'll just do a loading ... This guy should be delete image self-closing with a source. So that source is, we don't need to do a separate variable for the images path. It's always going to be, what is it going to be? It's going to be /images/ loading _ screen .gif. Let's do an alt of is equal to, let's do loading. And there we go. Again, we'll resize everything dynamically. So the loading page works. Let me do this. Let's go back to the player. It doesn't really matter. We're going to move on to the options app. Let me just do this. All right. So close this. Let's move on to the options page. Let's do, how about this? I'll discuss the design philosophy first. And so the options page is what happens when the user right-clicks the icon, they click the options, and it's going to be a full page in their browser window. Let's do this. So we have the options container here. This is not going to be the actual options page. I'm going to create another component called the options page, which is the actual options page. And why we're doing this is because we're not going to do it now because it's just going to be a waste of time. But once the foreground, so this app down here is fully built out, we're just going to copy this entire file, paste it into the options, and then replace the player with the options. And we need this because, or we're doing this because all the state and the functions present in this app, we want the options page to have that as well. This is going to make a lot more sense at the end of the series. Just understand that this is not the actual options page. This is, we're just going to replicate the entire app, put it in here, put the options page in place of the player. But for now, let me do this. Let's just make this a class component. I don't even need to do that. Let me just do this. And so it shares the same stylings as the foreground. So let me just do this. Copy, paste. Good. We don't need the player. We don't need the loading page. We need the options page. Let's do this and options page. Again, this whole file is going to change drastically. We're going to have a lot of state and a lot of functions. And modal, we don't need the container because this container makes things sit in the bottom right. We don't need that. And the player we don't need. We need the options page slash. There we go. Let's move on to this guy here. This is going to be I think it's a functional component. And so the options page is going to have a container of Chrome extension container options. Yes, and we need to import that actually. So import styles slash options. Where is it? Styles options. Yeah. Options styles.css. And we need the deck. The deck's going to be the thing that shows the user which deck they're choosing. So we'll do deck, and we'll do from ./deck.js. Let me make that quickly so we don't get an error. Let's go here, components, deck.js, RFC. Okay, options page. You can close this, deck, semicolons. And let's go on the browser so we can see the options page. Options. It's the default color of the container options, which reminds me, let's take off the color for the foreground, since you guys saw how it worked. So all the styles come from CSS. There's no style objects in this project. And we might still need this, though, so we can see stuff as we go ahead. I think in the next phase we'll do the actual responsive programming, so we'll take that out when we do that. Options page, save, foreground, deck. So we're going to start with the options page. And so even though the options container fills up the whole screen, the options page is always going to be saved, or excuse me, sized. Let me close that. Sized to about 60%. So no matter where we resize the browser, it's going to take a small square in the center. Chrome extension. Options, there we go, options page. And within the page, we're going to have a div, class name, Chrome extension, options, name. Name, we'll just say the current deck. Under the current deck, we're going to have some navigator buttons. So I'm going to do div, we're going to do Chrome extension, dash options, underscore navigator. We are there. We're going to have two buttons. I think it's going to be div chrome dash extension dot previous. There we go. Let me replicate that. And this one should be the next. And the codes for this were ampersand pound 60. There we go. Same thing here. The other one was 62. All right, copy, paste. 2 and 2. What do we got so far? Current deck, good. After that, we'll have the actual content. So div Chrome extension, what is it? Options content. And that's going to be the image, or the deck, excuse me. And under that, we're just going to have the name of the deck. So Chrome extension, and this is going to be deck type. For now, we'll just do orange. We're going to hard code it for now. All right, let's get the deck going. Just going to be a fragment, so I'm going to need to import the fragment. Get rid of this. Let's do a fragment. And it's just going to be an image. Let's do this. Let's go the image path route. Before I do it, let's import the styles. Styles/deck_styles.css. I imported the styles for the options page, right? Yeah, I did. And we'll do a const here. Images_path is equal to images/ and the alt will just do deck. Source will do the default. We'll do orange. So that's going to be the tilde. Let's do images path deck/default. It's going to be deck of orange.gif. There we go. And again, all this is hard coded. We're going to code for these buttons later. All right, let's move on to the pop-up page. Actually, before we do that, I forgot to add a class to the deck right here. Fragment source. It's going to have a class name of. It's going to be equal to what? Chrome extension. I think it's just deck. Yeah. There we go. All right, now let's move on to the pop-up. And so the pop-up's relatively, not relatively, it's extremely simple. When the user clicks on that button on the top right of their browser, it's going to show a screen that gives them an option to sign in or sign out. So let's go down here, and it is a function, so we can keep that. Let's import the style sheet for it. So import, we'll do ./styles/ and it was popup_styles.css. And I think it's 4 things. Let's say div with a hashtag. I think it's Chrome extension container_popup. Yeah, there we go. Pop-up, I like that. Pop-up, there we go. And we need the welcome, and then we need the 2 buttons. So div, and we'll do classes for these guys. Chrome extension, and we'll do the pop-up name. There we go. Name. We'll just say welcome. And the div class name is going to be Chrome extension sign in out. Sign_in out. And ×2 on that. This guy's going to be the sign in. And we're going to do, again, programmatically later, whether or not to show the sign in button or the sign out button. Sign out. Let's see what that looks like. Let's go here. There we go. That's what it's going to look like. It's size to, what, 300 by 600? What did I choose? 300 by 200. It's going to show when we click the little icon. That's why it's so small there. That's the sign in button and the sign out button. Close these 2. And so let's just refresh what we had. So we had the foreground working. We had the options, good, working. And we had the pop-up working. All right, so we have the basic scaffolding of this entire app done. Let's start with the logic of the foreground. So we're going to start with laying out all the state, and then I'll give you a brief rundown of how this thing works, and then it gets a bit complicated. A lot of lines of code for this one, guys. So I'll see you in that phase.